So I'm looking at this chart for the first time. Well, not exactly the first time, but to study it for the first time, yeah. So I already know the presidents by heart in order, but I don't know when they're in office and what party they are. So the best way to learn is not to use mnemonics, in my opinion, but to break it down. Like, for example, Washington, well, he's the first president, so you have to memorize it, 1789 to 1897. And you notice it's either they're 4 years, 8 years, or 6 years. So you break that down. Washington, and right after Washington came Adams. So he was in the year the Washington ended. So that's 1797, and the 1 year after the next century. So it's 18, and then Jefferson was the first president of the 19th century, and he was ruled for 8 years. Well, not ruled, served for 8 years rather. And then you take a break here, and then you come to Miller Fillmore. He started at the mid 19th century, so he was the first president. And then you take another break, and James Garfield, 1881. So you just have to remember because it's an anomaly, and it's a palindrome. So, but you don't use the same pattern twice. In mnemonics, they use the same pattern twice. Okay, so and then you break it down. Like in the 19th, Theodore Roosevelt was the first president of the 20th century in the 1900s, and right before Roosevelt was McKinley. And 1950s, well, from the 50s, Dwight Eisenhower started from 53. So Harry S. Truman was from, well, the war presidents were Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Truman, Eisenhower, and at the tail end we have Bush from 2001 and Barack Obama. That's for the 21st century. And so you use sort of micro mnemonics or like micro patterns to break it down. So if someone were to ask me in random when was Harry S. Truman, I wouldn't know. But I was just, as I said, he was right after the war. So it's 1945 to 1953. That's for 8 years, yeah. Again, Eisenhower, 53. He was the first president in the 1950s. Kennedy, the moon, 1961 to he was the 60s, in the early 60s. So you use like sort of reference points to remember the whole thing. 1869 is Ulysses Grant. So 1865 was Lincoln, probably. Yeah, Lincoln. He ended at 1865 for 4 years. He ruled for 4. Well, he served for 4 years. Johnson, right after him, for 4 years. So Harding. He was in 1920, roaring 20s. He was the Harding. So you just have to remember and use mnemonics like Harding, roaring. So Harding is the 1920s. Wilson, 1913 to 1921. Taft, the fat president, 1909. So I use it like a small mnemonic. Like he was like 909 pounds, even though he wasn't. So that's like 1909 to 1913. And Roosevelt, you connected back that he was the first president in the 1900s. And then Wilson, 1913 to 1921. Buchanan sounds like a buccaneer, so I just have to remember he was from 1857 to 1861. Pierce, 1853 to 1857. Fillmore, Pierce, Bacon, Lincoln. Okay, now time to test myself. So let's say, who was the first president? Well, when did, I don't know. Let me try something I don't know. Like Theodore Roosevelt, I remember he was the first president in the 1950s, so he was from 1953 to 1961. Let me check. Theodore Roosevelt 19. No, he wasn't the 1950s. He was the early 1900s. In the 1900s. So Theodore Roosevelt was 1901 to 1909. The one I was thinking of was Eisenhower, 1950 to 1961. So he was the one. So and then you do your error correcting, and that's how you remember. And let's see, John Quincy Adams. So he was in the first quarter century for 4 years, in the first quarter of the 1800s. Andrew Jackson, 1829 to 1837. Um, Jackson is in the $10 bill, so you have to remember it that way. So you just make unique reference stories. For polk, sounds like yolk, egg yolk, 1945 to 1849. 1845 to 1849. I mean, you just have to do it. It's sink or swim, basically. Chester Arthur. Arthur's the author, pen. So it's from the right after the palindrome president. Who was the palindrome president? James Garfield. And Garfield palindrome. So you can use a image of Garfield in the cemetery. And right after Garfield, Arthur Garfield. Well, Hayes Arthur, Hayes Garfield, Johnson Gray, Hayes Garfield, Hayes Arthur, Hayes Garfield. I don't know. Is Garfield the 20th president? Let me try on my rote memorization. Fillmore, Pierce, Bacon, Lincoln, Johnson, Gray, Hayes, Garfield, Arthur. Yeah. So that's like muscle memory for me because I used rote to remember the president's names. And JFK is 1961 for 4 years, 1963. Nixon, the impeachment president, is 1969 to 1974. Okay. Pierce is 1853. He was the second president in the 1850s. Yeah, and then 1837. We haven't covered Van Buren. We haven't covered these presidents. So it's kind of like a puzzle. You fit together a puzzle. Okay. Benjamin Harrison is 1889 to 1893. Grover Cleveland, 1893 to 1897. McKinley, 1897 to 1901. So I haven't covered this ones yet. So now I've been talking, but usually if you don't talk and if you study for 5 minutes, use the same patterns, you can still in a matter of 5 minutes using context, reference points, patterns,